And I'd just like to give an extra special thank you to my Asbantium level patrons, Chris Douglas, Fallon Cortez, and Jamie Ashton. Thank you so much for your support. Well. Here we are. When Doctor Who Season 2 got its first trailers, The Well was arguably the episode I was most excited for. Dark, mysterious sci-fi horror with a team of expendable soldiers and big, chunky space bases. It's everything I love about Doctor Who. But then the leaks came, and I started to get a bit worried. After all, if they were true, it would end up being the sequel to my favourite Doctor Who episode of all time, and we all know that's playing a very dangerous game. The world sees the Doctor and Belinda bounce into the year 500,000, where they end up in the middle of a mission to an abandoned colony on a dead planet. And there's only one survivor, so naturally, chaos ensues. But the question remains, is The Well good? Does it deliver as this season's first and possibly only real horror episode, and more importantly, as a rare sequel for Doctor Who? Well, as always, that's what I'm here to find out. And obviously, like with all my reviews, it should go without saying, but watch out for spoilers, because obviously I'm going to talk about them. Just thought I'd warn you there, so you have no excuses to moan. Okay, so to begin, the main arc of this season is the Doctor trying to get Belinda home, with them needing this Vindicator gadget to try and tether themselves to modern day Earth. And of course, because we've still got more episodes in this season, it doesn't work right away, and they end up in the year 500,000. I love that we get a return to the classic Welsh quarry here, Doctor Who's bread and butter. It's a really effective visual to emphasise how dead this planet 6767 is. It's a desolate wasteland battered by galvanic radiation, completely inhospitable aside from this mining colony, which is extracting carbon from deep below the surface. The design of this colony is absolutely sublime too. It's also rusty and blocky, more practical than it is sleek. It's an aesthetic I've always enjoyed a lot more than the pristine white walls of a lot of sci-fi ships or bases. When things are clunky like this, it just feels more lived in and actually functional. The set design really is brilliant. It really invokes a lot of sci-fi horror and reminds me of The Impossible Planet actually, which is also one of my favourite stories. The spacesuits are the antithesis of this though, unlike those of The Impossible Planet. But I think that works here because these characters are interlopers with highly specialised kit. They don't belong here, which is obviously the point, as I'll eventually get to. Oh, and we also get Britney Spears' Toxic for the costume change. Wow, it turns out that this episode was actually a prequel to End of the World this whole time. Okay, so the Doctor and Belinda stumble into this adventure, quite literally, although they magically have enough helmets for them too. Yes, in a classic Doctor Who fashion, we have a crew of soon-to-be dead bodies in the form of this military section of 11 soldiers. I do appreciate that the actors actually went through a quick crash course on how to move with military precision and behave like real soldiers. It really helps to create a feeling of authenticity to their actions. They have this rigid feeling of stunted, no-nonsense, by-the-books procedure that dissipates over time. It's so effective for showing how things can easily break down, even with all this military training and effectiveness. And also, it's just good to have a bunch of cannon fodder. I mean, only about 3 of these characters actually matter or have, well, character. We have Mo as the sympathetic, friendly face connecting with Belinda. She's nice, but that's about it. Then you have Cassio, who I bet Davis intentionally named after the watch brand. He's your typical second in command, clashing with his superior and causing trouble, and that's about it. Yeah, the weak point of the episode is this group of red shirts. They really don't have much character or depth outside of the leader Shire. The tough as nails leader with a sympathetic backstory of being from a war-torn world and joining the military at just 14 years old. Damn, at that age she may as well have just joined UNIT. It probably would have been a little bit easier for her. She's the main supporting character with very Adelaide Brooke vibes, bringing a great sense of order and authority, yet a little bit of flexibility because she's only human. Well, not actually human, but you know what I mean. Keelan Dunn does an amazing job with this character. She absolutely nails that presence of being a proper Doctor Who side protagonist, you know, who actually has 2 names, not just one. Oh, and to further the wider story arc, none of these soldiers have even heard of Earth or humanity, despite the Doctor knowing they should have at this point in history. So it further emphasizes the idea of something having gone majorly wrong with our planet. So it's just a good little sprinkling of the wider plot there. The soldiers find bodies with horrific injuries all over the colony, creating a real survival horror atmosphere because we're walking into this complete mystery. A dead planet, an abandoned mining station, all the mirrors are broken, and half the colonists being shot in the back. It's such a brilliant sci-fi horror premise. These dark, rusty corridors strewn with bodies as you get flickering lights. If it wasn't a family show, this would be full on like Dead Space or Event Horizon vibes, honestly. It's so unsettling. But what makes things even more unsettling is the presence of a single survivor, Alice, who is sitting alone in this big circular room surrounded by dead bodies, even that of her best friend who she had to kill. Alice is a pretty solid character, this deaf woman with a child back home she wants to return to. She's very scared and vulnerable. Rose Ayling-Ellis knocks it out of the park here. She really drives home that fear of isolation, desperation, and the danger of her situation. I mean, it's not surprising really, she grew up in Kent, she has experience, as do we all. Ayling-Ellis, and therefore Alice herself, is deaf, creating a really unique experience, and I appreciate the lengths the production team went to for authenticity with things like the sign language and the idea of turning your back on a deaf person to speak being disrespectful or deceptive. Like when we see Alice getting upset about when the Doctor does that to her. It's just these little touches that add so much character and legitimacy to scenes like this, making them feel so real. Anyway, even though the Doctor and Belinda are sympathetic to this scared, vulnerable mother, she's obviously a bit suspicious to the rest of us. After all, she's the only survivor of this mysterious massacre, and she survived 15 days like this? That's a long time if you're not alone. Yes, things start to take a turn and go bump in the night as Belinda catches a glimpse of something behind Alice. A really solid jump scare moment that completely changes the whole tone of the scene and makes things so much scarier because you start to realise they're not alone in this room, especially when it's combined with the revelation that something has come out of the well. Because, surprise surprise, when you go digging down the planet with a giant cosmic horror stay away sign in neon lights, you're not allowed to be upset when the cosmic horror is unearthed and starts killing you all. I mean, come on, have none of these characters ever seen a sci-fi movie before? Indeed, things build and build from here, the intensity growing as the paranoia kicks in. Another soldier seeing things in this empty room, showing it's not just Belinda seeing things. I love this concept, borrowing a bit from Turn Left with this idea of something being behind your back at all times, but people only being able to catch the quickest glimpse of it. It's really effective for crafting this idea of horror and fear that continually escalates. It's funny because during the trailers of season 2, I could have sworn we'd gotten a glimpse of this entity peeking out from behind boxes or something. I could never actually find it again when I was looking for it last week, because I was on Discord with my friends and I was like, I swear I saw this thing, and I just couldn't find it anywhere. So for that to actually basically be the gimmick of the monster really helped me enjoy it even more, because it felt like they'd been playing this game since before the episode even came out, and it added to my own personal immersion of it all. I mean, it would have been really funny if they did actually have that shot and then edited it out to kind of gaslight us all and give us all this Mandela effect. I think it was just me. Because, you know, sometimes it's great to accidentally completely fabricate your own memories of seeing things. A broken clock can be right twice a day after all. And sometimes that clock breaks at midnight. Yes, so a while back a big leak came out claiming a lot about season 2. I previously covered it in a whole video of its own, but one of the more eyebrow-raising claims was that The Well would be a sequel to Midnight, the 2008 episode which saw the 10th Doctor on a tourist shuttle to see the planet Midnight, which was a planet made completely of diamonds, yet completely inhospitable because of its extonic star. And, surprise surprise, it turned out something was actually alive on the planet, and it led to my favourite Doctor Who episode because of how this entity took control of Skye and started mimicking before straight up stealing the Doctor's voice. It's very claustrophobic, intense and psychological. So when the idea of a sequel came out, I was understandably pretty worried because I didn't feel like a follow-up would work. The Midnight Entity was the perfect standalone one-off monster. It was impossible, indescribable, and invisible. To bring it back would be to give us more of something we didn't really need more of. Because when you learn more about such a mysterious cosmic horror entity, they obviously lose what made them so mysterious and scary to begin with. I'm looking at you, Weeping Angels. Shame on you. That was my main worry coming into this episode, because I thought it might be the same case of telling or showing us too much, but thankfully that really wasn't the case this time around. There's a great moment of mounting dread as the Doctor is talking to Shea about the planet, because he's starting to put together the pieces when he remembers the mix of irradiated, inhospitable surface, the carbon in the well, and the nature of this massacre. Indeed, it turns out the star used to be extonic and burned out, leaving this previously glittering diamond planet into a grey, lifeless husk. Because, yes, this is indeed the planet Midnight. This isn't a spiritual successor sequel, it's not the same entity on a different planet, it's literally the exact same planet in the far future, long after the events of that original episode. So, the leaks were very true. It leads to an absolutely excellent penny drop moment as Shia names the planet's old designation.
What was the planet called?
It was called Midnight.
Honestly, if this hadn't been leaked for me beforehand, it would have been such an incredible reveal and a shocking moment, almost on par with something like The Master in Utopia. It just perfectly nails that sense of dread because our familiarity of that episode and the setting, how it drove the Doctor to his breaking point and made him more scared and vulnerable than he's ever been before. I can imagine this moment worked really well for a lot of people who weren't in the know. It's an amazing twist, and it establishes the world as essentially the aliens to Midnight's Alien, a more action-oriented revisitation of the same concept.
I say we take off and nuke the entire site from orbit.
And this site from orbit.
I do appreciate the very quick flashback to Midnight, just to remind more casual fans why it's significant. It's not egregious like having 15 and Belinda sitting with an iPad watching Midnight. This works a lot more effectively here. What I appreciate about this episode is how it changes the Midnight entity without adding anything really new to disrupt or ruin it. It is different this time, not doing the voice stealing like before, which obviously would have been a much quicker giveaway and also would have just been a poor man's imitation of the original. No, you do have to change things up a little bit.
Whatever's inside her is brand new, and that's fascinating.
So this time it hides behind your back like a parasite, making people paranoid of you, and it hops from one person to the other until everyone is dead. In Midnight, we had a very brief allusion to the entity's motivation. It was waiting in the dark and cold, all alone, until these people came along with bodies it could possess and torture. It wanted freedom and escape. But the Well elaborates on this, exploring the idea that it doesn't just want freedom and warmth, it is deeply sadistic and actively enjoys playing these games, making people turn on each other. We saw this before with Sky, how she became more cocky and power drunk as the entity caused chaos in the climax of Midnight. This is a creature that thrives on the chaos and psychological torment of the victims. It really is just sadistic and enjoys playing games because, I mean, the whole thing in this episode is that when you stand in the midnight clock position, it kills you, and obviously it's doing that because it knows the planet was called Midnight, so it's just having a bit of a joke at other people's expense. I like how the Well retains a link to lines actually said during Sky's speech in Midnight. She talks about how the entity creeps into your head and makes you fight people by whispering.
Creeps into your head and whispers.
It's whispering.
Maybe that's how you survived. You can't hear it.
I like how this keeps the monster perfectly in line with what we already knew and understood about it. It's not adding too many new things, it's just showing a different method it can use to reach the same means. After all, it's implied to be the exact same entity, so it probably learned that the whole repetition and voice stealing approach isn't reliable.
Shamble, bobble, dibble, dooble.
It still possesses people, just in a different way now. It's basically doing the exact same thing as it did in Midnight, except without even needing to take direct control. It can just sit behind and hop from body to body because it knows more about these warm humanoid bodies now. It's essentially just learned how to defend itself while still doing the same thing. I mean, if you're stuck on a planet for like 500,000 years, you'd probably give yourself a bit of a debrief about how you messed up your first attempt to escape, so your second can go a bit better. Much like in Midnight, the group starts to break down as Cassio declares a red code to take over, stripping his commander of power until after this whole incident is over. And then, of course, everything goes wrong as Cassio tries to trap the entity, only for an almost comedic-esque sequence of events where half the group accidentally looks at Alice's back and gets killed. Like genuinely, it's almost like dominoes falling or a Rube Goldberg machine, because of how it just keeps happening. Yeah, I would admit I'm not too fond of the whole flying off approach. I understand the kind of psychic blast concept of it, and we know the creature is somewhat capable of things like that because we saw similar in Midnight when it broke in, but it takes away from the horror of the episode since it's a bit too silly and PG. A lot of people have said that the people should have instead just dropped dead, and I think I prefer that to them being flung off comedically and instantly dying upon impact. It devalues the implication of the brutal, horrific massacre the protagonist discovered when they arrived. And speaking of, I can't help but agree with some people when they say potentially the more interesting episode was before we even got there. It was my same issue with Girl in the Fireplace.
We've had some cowboys in here.
But I still think this one works really well for what we do get. Anyway, there's a great moment when the Doctor talks to the entity directly, trying to understand it.
What are you?
After all, he's wondered for all these years. That impossible entity was something that traumatized him beyond belief because it was one of the few monsters to completely break him, taking away his ability to talk or to move, and making him so vulnerable. Gatwa does a really amazing job here, selling the idea of this lasting trauma and pain still affecting the Doctor all these years later because those feelings and that helplessness comes bubbling back to the surface. It's a rare instance of his tears actually being warranted for once, because yes, he cries once again. It's terrifying to think that the entity knows his name as it whispers to him. Whispers that Alice couldn't hear, hence the only reason she's still alive, which is a good way of using a deaf character with an entity like this. Again, this all dates back to Midnight itself, because of that monologue about it whispering to you to drive you crazy. I'm glad we don't get to hear what it's saying, because we don't need to know. Like I mentioned, it's cosmic horror, let it be a mystery. Unlike in Midnight, the Doctor is able to be a little bit more proactive this time, so he realises he can make the mind's mercury reflect the entity to make it see itself and free itself from Alice. That's why it broke all the mirrors, because it can't look at its own reflection. It's kind of like basilisk rules. I don't like that the entity becomes a corporeal, physical being we get glimpses of. Even if they're just glimpses, I don't want to see anything about this monster or its physiology. I do appreciate how the Doctor wants to know though, stopping just to get a glimpse of it because he wants answers. He can't bear not knowing what this monster is or where it truly came from. That's part of why he fears it so much, because it's that sense of the unknown. The fear of what we don't or can't understand and comprehend. Alice makes it out alive and free, but I find it really interesting that the airlock says there are 4 people inside when there's only 3. But more on that in a moment. Naturally, because there are only 7 people and there's only room for 6, our main protagonists have to wait. So obviously, the entity breaks into the waiting room and takes Belinda. I was surprised, honestly. I expected it to be Mo, since she was obviously the most disposable one left and had that bond with Belinda, so I thought it would be obvious to put her in the situation for sympathy. Although actually she's the only one that survives, which is quite a funny twist. But no, instead they have Belinda as a very effective way of adding stakes. After all, obviously this is our companion, and now she has the super evil, murdery, cosmic horror death monster on her back, and there's nothing they can really do about it this time. I guess all they could do is hit that like and subscribe button. Bam, got you again. You thought I'd forgotten like last week, but nope, I got you. Shea's whole thing is that she's a precise shot, capable of shooting womp rats in Beggar's Canyon, just like the simulations. So she shoots Belinda in the exact perfect spot to kill her without killing her, voluntarily becoming a host herself, and running all the way to the well with a convenient inner monologue filling in her backstory for her. It's a very similar ending to Midnight itself, a self-sacrifice to defeat the entity by using its own physical limitations to vanquish it on the planet it lurks. It's okay, I guess. It's serviceable. It's not the best ending, but it's also way far from the worst. It's clear that the entity can't voluntarily jump to a new host, or at least it's assumed, while the current one is living. So it's clever for Shea to take advantage of that apparent rule. It just kind of sucks that they have to do this characterization when she's already in her death sequence, and not earlier on in the episode when it actually matters. You know, they basically just tell her as she's running to her death, hey, look at me, look, I have a character. Anyway, Belinda survives and we get a nice emotional moment in the TARDIS regarding Earth and how they might never get back home. But the really interesting part about this ending is when Mo is back on the ship, reporting to her base commander, Mrs. Flood. Russell really did just want to do Susan Twist 2 Electric Boogaloo here, didn't he? Even if it is basically the whole Susan Twist thing again, it's really interesting because it shows Mrs. Flood in an increasingly more villainous light. And her asking about the Vindicator is an especially valuable wrinkle. I won't spoil anything, but considering this episode being a Midnight sequel was real, the same leaker's information about Mrs. Flood is increasingly likely to be real too, and it's boosted by the characterization in this final scene. But by far the best part about this ending is the very final scene, when another soldier, Val, is chatting to Mo about the whole nightmare down there, only to seemingly see something right behind Mo, suggesting the whole nightmare is about to begin again. I absolutely love this idea. I know it's Horror 101, always leaving things open for another sequel, and it's also very much in line with Aliens in that regard, since Alien Cubed sees an alien egg hatch within the escape pod from the end of Aliens. So I guess we're in for Midnight 3 with Paul McGann, hell yeah, hashtag McGann gang. The one thing the Midnight Entity wanted was to escape that planet and find more people to torture, so it's a very chilling prospect to imagine it's now in space, safely having escaped into infinity while Midnight itself is nuked from orbit. Again, nice Aliens reference there. Now, the question is this: how did it escape? Oh, I have a couple of theories here. First of all, there's that fourth reading in the airlock, suggesting it was either on Alice again or one of the other two red shirts with her. But Belinda definitely still does get claimed by the entity, so maybe there are two of them?
This is getting out of hand. Now there are two of them.
It's possible that instead of defeating the monster with its reflection, it actually duplicated the entity somehow, so maybe Alice takes one to the ship while Shea banishes the other into the Shadow Realm. Then how does Mo end up with one on her back? Well, I think that maybe Shea didn't actually get it on her back at all. We assume throughout that it jumps onto the killer to move. But what if it was actually smarter than that and didn't fall for this obvious trap, instead jumping to Mo and allowing Shea and the Doctor to think their plan worked? After all, Shea wants to believe it's on her so that she can save the day, and Mo is too busy and full of adrenaline to possibly realise it's on her instead. In fact, and I know I'm reading too much into just a normal glimpse here, but there's a moment where the Doctor very briefly looks at Mo's back and has that same kind of confused reaction as if he saw something there. So I genuinely believe they didn't actually defeat the Midnight Entity, it tricked them, and now it's free and more dangerous than ever. Because that kind of trickery is what it would do based on the 2 episodes we've now seen with it. As for the whole 4th person reading in the airlock, who knows? It's weird if it does suddenly have vital signs because they didn't see any before, so it doesn't make sense to magically suddenly have them now. But maybe there are 2 of them now and they can team up in a buddy cop duo where one steals voices and the other hides on their back. I mean, come on, Davis, you've got to write that now. It'll print money. Just throw Paul McGann in there and anything can happen. I was very worried about the world going in. I knew the potential twist from the beginning, and I was very apprehensive about it potentially ruining my favourite Doctor Who episode and one of my favourite Doctor Who monsters. But I think it worked very well as a more action-oriented follow-up, revisiting the setting and the creature now that it has had hundreds of thousands of years to change its strategies and abilities. It's nowhere near as scary as it was the first time. This episode isn't going for the claustrophobic psychological horror of Midnight. It's not meant to be the terrifying exploration of human horror that previous episode was. It's still scary and chilling at parts. Director Amanda Brocchi once again smashes it after her debut of Lux in the last episode. The grim, gritty base adds an element of sci-fi survival horror, and it works so effectively. This dead planet and derelict colony emphasizing the sense of desperation and desolation. I really like how they bring the Midnight Entity back without ruining it. Yes, they added to it with these new abilities, but the majority of it is still very consistent with its first appearance. Unlike with the Weeping Angels, nothing we learn ruins or detracts from the monster. It's still just as unexplainable as ever, and if the ending is to be taken literally, it's now free from the cold waste of midnight. I do think the episode suffers from the whole psychic blast attack and the extreme lack of characterization for the supporting cast outside of Alice and Shia. Everyone else is very forgettable and non-existent, even as red shirts. But it's still a very thrilling, very gripping Doctor Who horror story, working so effectively as a rare sequel, and specifically as a sequel to a story that never could have a sequel. I had a great time watching The Well, even with my concerns going in. but it's written, acted and directed phenomenally. It's a worthy, if naturally weaker follow-up to such a modern classic. If Lux was a B+, then The Well is an A-. It's far from the perfect masterpiece of Midnight, but it builds upon that story in a way that doesn't hamper the original, which is how a sequel should always be. But what do you think of The Well? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you manage to get a hard bingo this week? Let me know, Duncan. And all of you, let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. And I'd just like to give a special thank you to my Asbantium level patrons, Chris Douglas, Fallon Cortez, and Jamie Ashton, my Platinum level patron, Matthew Burns, and all my Gold level patrons, Ben Salmon, Daniel Shillito, James Alea Waterhouse, Lee Marie, Penguin of the Patreon, and Seb Falco. Thank you so much for your support.